Hello guys! I decided, in light of the deck only being shown in a deck profile and rather not in a actual how do you play this deck, I think it is kind of worth to do a test hand video about this. This is not a combo deck, but it specifically has a lot of think chains that you have to do depending on how you want to build your board, because the board is kind of limited, but even these nuances make some of the differences, and it's also a lot of the decision chains of things you have to do. Luckily, we do not have to worry anymore about Kitkalos because she apparently got banned. That makes a lot of things easier, specifically to activate certain cards like Albazoa. But anyways, I'll get into this, and I'll treat this like I'm going blind first. This deck list has slight changes towards the last one. I replaced Eclipses for Book of Moons, because Book of Moon, in testing, Eclipse is very good, but if you are getting stopped by non-engine, like imperms and stuff, Eclipse can actually cause you to lose the game because your opponent gets to draw up to 3 cards depending on the matchup, which is a lot, and basically usually it's game-ending advantage that they get. So rather, a Book of Moon is a better interruption thing at the cost of being worse into certain matchups. But in general, I've been liking Book of Moon. And Triple Tactics Talent, I have replaced with 1 punishment and 1 other card that I cannot think of right now. Mainly because I'm lending out the punishments to some of my colleagues at the YCS Lyon, since I am not at Lyon. Otherwise, this deck is for the new format. But rather than doing a deck profile, I'm going to actually do a test hand replay here with a couple of test hands. This deck is also still in work, and I still need my second and third set of Triple Tactics tasking. So in general, it would probably be nice to get that stuff done. I did a lot of testing. The Kashtira matchup is very dice roll, but if you get to go first, you usually get to control the game. Well, if they go first, you of course have to find an out for a Rise Heart, otherwise your game plan does not work. And yeah, so let's get into testing hands. Okay, very solid. What can I say? So I think with this hand, if we go in, it makes most sense to first go Ecclesia and going for the Dogmatika Matrix directly. We don't want to use Nadir directly, because if we use Nadir, we could get baited. We could get ashed on Nadir, and Nadir is just a +1 that you don't want to get ashed. So as next, we then go for Pre-Prep. Pre-Prep is going to get us our White Knight and our Macabre. I think I replaced it with double punishment. So currently main deck triple punishment. So don't wonder if I am drawing way too many punishments in my test hands here. You could say this is a greedy going first list if you want to, but in general, this deck has so many going second cards, it's hard to say that it's a going first deck, when half of the time it's just better going second. Dogmatika Matrix. We are going to get ourselves Calamity, because resolving Calamity is always correct. Oh yeah, in the extra deck, I also switched to double Titanic Cloud here for reference, because I wanted to play around Bestials, and this basically punishes Bestials by having double Titanic Clouds. And of course, it also plays around Diablosis and Unicorn. Okay, so now we go Calamity. we summon White Knight, and we send ourselves a Titaniclad. Then we would use Matrix to look at your opponent's extra deck and send one card. So in this case, for example, we would send a Kaleido Heart. Also, kind of interesting would be to send stuff like Dweller or Kid Kalos, lol, and get them a game loss. Anyways, like you would send just one card, but let's pretend it's this Kaleido Heart here. Okay, and then I would actually go for Nadir. And I would send a Garua to get a +1 here. And get ourselves an Ecclesia for follow-up. Which would mean that we are indicating already that, or actually, we're not getting an Ecclesia. We're getting ourselves a Maximus right now here. And because we've seen the extra deck of our opponent, we could technically go for a greedy Maximus. And then get some stuff recycled here. So we then go for said greedy. If we go for Maximus, we're playing around Lava Golem, but we're playing into Sphere mode. So that's a thing we have to think about. Then we would, I would banish the Titaniclad, which sounds counterintuitive, but this has a reason. Then we would use Maximus. Your opponent has to send 2 cards. They would send their own Garura and something. But we would send a Titaniclad and an Omega. This is just to progress the game state a little, and also to resolve Omega to shuffle back the Garura. This again plays into Bestials, but it's fine. And then we would do set 1, end phase. Titaniclad gets ourselves another Ecclesia. And then we would be set up for next turn because our hand was Ecclesia Fleur Macabre. We have Book of Moon as an additional interruption towards our White Knight, which can also be used to protect our plays from Imperm and several other negates. And also this would require Kashtira to open specifically Birth to play through our board. Or Rise Heart plus Kashtiosis. And our top deck would be another Book of Moon. So basically, we would probably break most of the boards, and because we have Matrix, if they don't out it, and Maximus is definitely a card they have to out, otherwise the game gets progressed into an unwinnable state for them, usually, unless you're playing against Labyrinth or some kind of weird deck. Okay, next test hand. Prosp, Slayer, Matrix, Prosp, Zoa. This hand is kind of a meh. Mainly because Prosp is... It's weird in this deck because you don't really want to Prosp that much, but kind of have to. We would banish this, and one of the Titaniclads. And look at top 3 because we technically already can play. So in this case, we would have the option to go for Diviner to get more ritual plays, which is not needed because we technically already can summon Zoa. So we would get Fenrir here to value on them in case. Now we would go Matrix. Matrix gets us the Calamity. Special Fenrir. Effect Fenrir, add Fenrir. Going second, this hand would have been actually kind of nice. We go Calamity, summon Zoa, send Final Sigma. Then we go Matrix. Depending on if we want to use Zoa right now or not, we could go Matrix, look at their extra deck. The bad thing about this is we would lose an interruption. Or we could just refuse to use Zoa and use Matrix to go into our extra deck and send ourselves a Titanic Lad. Which I think is what we would do, even though we have quite a lot of potential follow-up in our hand. But we specifically want to make a board that can play. So what we would now do is add ourselves with Titanic Lad Fleur. The reason why I'm not specialing Ecclesia is because I want to play around Super Poly. Super Poly into Garura would completely remove the Fleur interruption and give them a monster, rather than just taking them away. Because Super Poly is going to be played by some rogue decks as well as branded. And it's just best to avoid playing into it if you can. Zone placement for the Zoa. It's irrelevant technically, but probably here. Yeah, okay. And then for turn, we would draw Ecclesia. How wonderful. I guess if we're that good of players. Our Prosp would excavate 3 and get ourselves, okay, a Calamity. This would, if Zoa survives, like if they don't open stuff like Fenrir or Jerusalem, Zoa will probably live. So in case of that, we can use Matrix to gain more advantage and then get ourselves another send and then build up a little bit more of a board and potentially OTK. As you see, the deck is not the greatest at making impressive end of boards, but the thing about the deck is mainly that you want to remove most of the options that they have in their extra deck. Specific cards that you want to remove is versus Sprite. You definitely want to first remove their Gigantics if you can. But only if you know that you can remove 2 Gigantics if they play 2. Otherwise, if you cannot remove all Gigantics out of play, you have to remove the Mosquito. If the Mosquito is in their extra deck, they can OTK you anytime. It's kind of whack. Zeus is not that big of a problem simply because Fleur de Lis exists. And specifically because we were playing 2 Fleur, it is quite common that if we normal summon or special summon Ecclesia and they respond with Zeus to out our stuff, we can just chain Fleur and completely blank the Zeus and potentially after that go even into a tactics play. Anyways, next hand. This is very similar again. Kind of usual, but this hand would always do the same thing. In this hand, we guaranteed activate Zoa. And we let them send 7. And then afterwards, we would go for Maximus, banish here, and I would go to send a draw 1 and a play, unless they have unless they sent something really disgusting. Like if you play against branded, I think this would probably be a game-losing play. But against every other deck, it's just worth doing this. And then we go for a draw. Okay, we go for and we got a White Knights. That's kind of mediocre. And then in the end phase, we get to special Ecclesia, and we get to search ourselves another floor. And for our follow-up, we would have the White Knight summon, and technically Ultimate Slayer to out whatever they made. And our top deck would be an Ecclesia. I guess I'm just too good at top decking Ecclesia. Okay, now let's go for a pile shuffle, because this hand was very similar to the last. We're playing apparently 41 cards. I will have to check on that. Usually you want to play in this deck 40 exactly. But if we're playing 41, we were playing 41 apparently. I do want to work on a branded Dogmatika list with the rituals. That uses a small branded fusion engine to generate a going first play. I just still have to design how I want, what I want to summon and how I want to do it, and maybe potential bricks that I want to play or want to avoid to play. So anyways, book, Fenrir, okay, we already have 2 interruptions, 3 interruptions, 4 interruptions, no, 3 interruptions still, but Prosperity is going to grab 3, and I guess we're just playing the long game. But Punishment is already engine. I think you could even go for a Prosp 6. And there we would have our Nadir Servant, which should enable everything we want. This Nadir Servant would definitely send Titaniclad, by the way. And we would go for Ecclesia, and with Ecclesia we would get ourselves Calamity. We're not going for a Ritual Summon this hand, but yeah, in general, it would be, it's a little bit of an awkward hand simply because of the lack of engine. Servant Macabre, okay. Okay, this is again playable. I think we could go directly for a Nadir Bait. Wait, this is actually not Bait, but we could go for a Nadir. And we could pretend like we don't have Ecclesia. This is another option if you want to, opponents to think like that you have like a weird hand or something, because you don't want to Nadir first, ever in other decks. You want to like Nadir last. And Nadir first usually means like, oh god, I bricked. But in this case, it actually does not mean that. In this case, it means we're getting Maximus to resolve. And yeah, Maximus is 100% free unless you play against specifically branded. In that case, it's kind of rough, but otherwise I would just resolve Maximus. And then we draw off Garura. Okay, we got another Imperm. Quite nice. We banish the Garura, special Maximus. Then we use Maximus. We send Arclight and Clad. Or actually, do we send even Clad? I think we just send Grand Guignol. In case they bestial us, they have to bestial the Grand Guignol. And otherwise, we would just have extra engine on our on their turn, which is good. Especially for the Sword Soul, this will trigger a lot. This also triggers in, of course, the tier matchup. This triggers in Sprite, because if they do like Beaver effect, you get to summon with that. Okay, so now we get to search ourselves a Ritual Monster. We guaranteed 10 out of 10 times search White Knight here, because we already have the grave set up. Normal Ecclesia. We would now know what they're playing, so we could decide to go for Punishment directly if they're playing a trap deck, but usually I'm still going for Matrix. because I want to get this grind game going. Matrix. Technically, you want Maximus summon somewhere else, but actually we're going to summon a White Knight in one of these zones here, simply because of the restriction effect that White Knight has. In testing, it has come up that people have been not reading my cards and taking White Knight, which in return caused people to lose the game, because this thing has a special summon lockout mechanic where where the controller cannot special summon from the extra deck. But anyways, we would go for Calamity. Then we go Calamity White Knight, and we are going to send Clad. And then we will go to look at their extra deck now, because we already know their deck and we want to nuke the most important card out of it, because they probably nuked all their flex spots out. We're gonna nuke like their where it hurts. And then we go set 2, and then we get the end phase search for Fleur. The bad part about this is we don't have direct guaranteed follow-up, but we still have Grand Guignol. And Grand Guignol is not going to search is going to summon Ecclesia. So if Grand Guignol triggers on opponent's turn, you're going to summon Ecclesia, but you're going to wait with the Grand Guignol until main phase 2 if possible, because you want to play around evenly matched. And banishing multiple Ecclesia is kind of rough. So we go for Matrix, because then on the follow-up we guaranteed have we have a Matrix, which is basically search 2, and this guarantees us to get our second Fleur, which in normal matchups should result in us being able to crack the board on the crackback and then win the game. We of course have still Slayer, which is a shit card going first, but this card is just so good going second. And we have double Imperm, which is pretty damn solid. We're going to use the Imperms first to play around the triple Tactics Tasking, because Tactics Tasking would not hurt us too much unless they draw 2 in that hand, because the most they would see is the Ultimate Slayer. And that's why we would save our Grand Guignol in case they want to look at our hand. The only thing that would really hurt is Tactics Tasking into some kind of other spell than Talent, which would obviously be rough. Spellbook of Eclipse, they would still have to out 3 monsters, and we have double Imperm for the Zeus, technically. We would just save Imperm for Zeus. I guess we're going second with this hand. But anyways, going first, we first of all special Fenrir before we activate Prosp. We don't want to excavate another Fenrir. We search Fenrir. Then we Prosp, and for the Prosp banish, go here, 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 and you could technically go and banish. I think we're going to go banish the Bulsa. And I'm also not playing the Arise Heart right now. I'm still testing around with the extra deck to get the most value out of it. So now we get the Excavate 6. We really want to see Ecclesia. Or Punishment. Punishment is good too. So in that case, we would take Punishment. Matrix is good, but I would rather want it in my deck so that I can top deck it. Sadly, it does not mean that we can top deck one of them, because it's going to be under our deck. And then I guess we would set one Ultimate Slayer and Punishment to play around a Cosmic Cyclone. And then we would pass turn. If we're unlucky, we eat the Cosmic on the correct target. But if not, we're going to go for the send either Titaniclad or Grand Guignol, and we really want to get out a Dogmatika monster as fast as possible. This depends strongly on the deck. If they're playing Sword Soul, we're going to like Punishment the very first thing, and then we're going to use Grand Guignol to get ourselves Ecclesia, and Ecclesia is going to get ourselves Dogmatic Matrix. Otherwise, I would go for Titaniclad and get ourselves the stuff in the end phase. Or if in general, if the deck triggers the Grand Guignol. The main thing that this deck can do very well is go second into regular boards. That means nothing, no floodgates, but mainly like destructive interruptions and targeting negations are pretty easy. As long as they don't have too many responses towards spells, you're pretty damn decent into going second. So I'm going to open a going second hand and think about how we can play, but this is starting out well with drawing 2-ofs. Going first, this would just be a White Knight pass hand, but going second, I think we would first go for Imperm on one of the monsters. Then we would go for Diviner. Diviner sends either this, or we even go for this if we know that there's something that we have to pop. But I would go for Arclight. And Arclight gets ourselves a White Knight. Then we link it into an Almirage. Now I go Calamity into a White Knight in attack position, because potentially our opponent messes up and we get an OTK line. If they negate the Calamity, you can just use another Calamity because it's an activate once per turn. Then we go Nadir, another activate once per turn effect, by the way. And we get to send ourselves probably an Entis to get ourselves Ecclesia. We special Ecclesia and we get ourselves a Matrix. And now the fun part is, because if they control a monster like Kit Kalos, let's say, just for fun, we would get to use Matrix here to get ourselves, for ones, we could get ourselves a White Relic as our ritual monster, and as our normal search, we could go for a Maximus. And now they need an answer to the Maximus. And if they answer anything after our White Knight is on the field, we get to use White Knight to dismantle up to 2 cards off of their board, because one of them is going to be attacked by him because he's going to be huge. And the other one is going to be popped by an Entis. So we add these, and then we banish whatever we sent off of Nadir to get ourselves a Maximus. Then we use Maximus to get ourselves, we could get ourselves right now here an Arclight and an Entis. We chain block the Arclight with an Entis and pop something. So now we would get ourselves the Dogmatika Macabre. And then we would see if they have a way to get a huge monster. If they still would have had a negate and the Maximus would have not been good, we could have instead also gone for a Search Fleur and not played into the second Ritual Summon. This actually happens a lot, so consider how you want to play. But I think this line is also pretty stable. So we get to send this. We get to get our Macabre and our White Relic. We special White Relic. We target the biggest monster on board, and we target Relic because we want to boost her, because White Knight is going to be protected by Relic on the crackback. We're banishing for that one of the Arclights because we already banished an Entus. And we are going to be able to actually send something off of this, which would be a Titanic Cloud, so that we can get an interruption on their turn. And then we go commit for a battle phase, attack and produce game. Or not game, probably, but it would still be a quite bit of damage. Did I send off of Matrix? I'm not sure. But if I didn't, then that send would have been a Garura and get an extra draw, probably. The main strength of this deck is how easily it dismantles rogue decks with the sheer, like, you have to negate everything, especially like Matrix, because Matrix actually sometimes is as or even more impactful than Nadir, because it's the only card that can search a ritual monster and Flora at the same time. And like the simple threat of searching a Fleur is quite deadly. Okay, let's do 2 more test hands. Again, going second this time. This starts good. Very good. I mean, this already is pretty damn strong, and we get even more. So, first of all, depending on the board state, I would directly go for a Fenrir special. And we would get ourselves another Fenrir. But it depends on the board state. If the opponent has a Fenrir, I'm not even sure if I would use a Fenrir right here. And I could instead go for a Nadir, send Antos. Or I could directly go for a Matrix. So now we got another Fenrir. I would go for the normal summon Ecclesia and get a search here. That search would 9 out of 10 times be Fleur. Because whatever they have as monsters, I pretty much want to negate. Then we go into Dear Servant. Go send Entus, get ourselves Maximus. We pop one. This is sadly all hypothetical because it's very hard to do solo anti-board testing. I'm going to probably find somebody that can help me with getting the branded matchup sorted, because the branded matchup is the thing that worries me most about this deck. I really want to know how all of that will play out. Okay, so now we get the Entus pop off of the Nadir. Then we always make sure that I still have one monster. So we go for Matrix. And Matrix is going to get ourselves, in this case, we could go very threatening depending on the board state, or we could go less threatening. But I think in this case, it's actually worth it to search Calamity plus Albazula. Because we already have a lot of damage on board, we would probably be able to produce game through whatever board state there is. We go Calamity, summon this. We are at 3 summons. We send Final Sigma. All right. Then we use Matrix here. We get to send another card out of our extra deck. We send an Arclight, we search off of Arclight, and we will get ourselves the Relic. Okay. Then we go Dogmatika Macabre. Summon the relic by banishing an Arclight. And then relic will target our Albazoa and I think herself again to just make her even more annoying. We still have 4 cards in hand. We would have Nadira's follow-up, so we would not have to worry about generating follow-up for turn 5. Or for turn 4. But we generally want to be sure that our flurry is going to go through. We're currently at 4 summons, so it's quite risky to play into Nib. But this should be game before Nib because of her being 45, 4000, Fenrir double kill, and Ecclesia. They themselves are already 8-5 game. And these out 2 things. But in case anything, if we really have to commit into Nibiru, we could go into Fleur and then try to push. And then if we actually get nibbed, just in case, and we eat like a big token, we can still go for a Maximus. And then we can use the Maximus, banish. I would keep the final Sigma in graveyards because that is one of the ones that cannot be bestialed. And then we get to send ourselves some extra follow-up. So we send these 2. We get to draw 1. Oh, Book of Moon. And then we set those. And then in the end phase, we would get ourselves the second Fleur. And that's why we play 2 Fleur. Because one could be used for board breaking and the other one could be used as a crackback interruption. So we would have 2 interruptions through Nib plus destroying a lot of interruptions on a board. Of course, we're playing here with... it's hard to say how the other player would interact. I think the main weakness would just be to take care of this, because this is such an insanely good card. But yeah, those are like thought trains that you can do to break boards. I will probably do another video on this deck, going through all of the engine of this, and like, not as a deck, but simply just looking at the Dogmatika cards in specific, so that you know what you can do with them. Because I've seen some people play some whack builds with the not so common Dogmatika played cards in Dogmatika. For example, the insane artwork that is represented on Dogmatika Turgy. Or playing cards like Dogmatika Genesis or Dogmatika Nexus. And there are some things that you can think about, especially in, like, technically it would be really good right now, but it's hard to say if there is going to be another format where we get milled 10 cards in a turn. But there are some effects that you have to be aware of that you could technically abuse, but they're very niche. But I still want to like embrace innovation, and if somebody finds a good solution for these cards, it just makes sense to cover interactions with them. And I'm also going to, of course, go over the ones that you would guaranteed play, because it just makes sense. And this is the last hand. Slayer, Zoa, White Knight, Pre-Prep, Imperm, Ecclesia. This is rough, but we have a way to take care of 3 extra deck interruptions, depending on how Ultimate Slayer, what Ultimate Slayer has to target, because we have Imperm and Slayer. We would go for Pre-Prep to bait an Ash, because Pre-Prep is pretty much dead here. If there's no Ash coming on this Pre-Prep, and this is why like Pre-Prep is like mediocre at best in this deck, even though you can resolve it, is because you can only get Dogmatika Macabre. But it's fine, because in some cases it's actually pretty good to have at least this like card that feels threatening, because it's a +2, but in reality it's just like not threatening at all. And then we would go, of course, for a Cleave and Normal Summon effect. We would get ourselves Matrix every time. And Matrix would get ourselves a Calamity and probably, depending on how the board state is, either a Maximus or a Fleur. You could even go ahead and say, I really want the follow-up and go for an Ecclesia. But we are already generating follow-up off of the Titaniclad that we're going to be sending no matter what. So now let us say we are getting Fleur because it makes the most sense. So now we have all 3 ritual monsters and Fleur. Depending on the board state, we could decide for any 3 of them, but it probably makes sense to summon the Big Boy Beater first, even though it's like no interaction at all. Or you could also go for a line where you first send White Knight, then you go send a card, So we would send probably a Grand Guignol in case they have any kind of a disruption that is a monster summoning. And then we could go with Matrix and send ourselves an Entus. And the Entus would take care of something or proc it. If our opponent is intelligent, they don't chain anymore because White Knight is so threatening. Or they use 2 interruptions to take care of White Knight, which is pretty efficient then, because we would have already taken care of 4 interruptions at that point with Imperm and the Slayer. Then we would go Macabro, and in this case we have a couple of options. Relic would be our safest option, so I would probably go for Relic and boost up Relic as big as possible. And then we get ourselves Ascend here, which is going to be a Titaniclad. We're now playing into Super Poly, of course, but it's hard to not play into Super Poly with Garura existing. And now we would go into the battle phase. If White Knight was triggered, we're going to use, of course, the White Knight effect to send even more. Let's say if he was triggered, what would we send? I think we would send 1 Antus, and we would send whatever they have from their extra deck. And then we would pop whatever. And then we try to do as much damage as possible. And in the end phase, what do we get? I think in this case we would actually, because let's say our Fleur never triggered, we could still get ourselves follow-up. Which then would, if we don't die on the following turn, because we still have 2 interruptions on the following turn, we could still, yeah. Actually, we have 2.5. I'll count Relic as half of an interruption. You should not forget her effect because she denies Zeus most of the time whenever she's on the board. And also we have Grand Guignol, which is even more follow-up. But it's pretty damn complicated. You have to do a lot of thought trains. And that is why I say it's very important to know what matchup you're playing against. And this deck's ceiling is definitely limited by the matchup knowledge that you have and what decks people play. You have to be up to date with the meta and with how you interact with certain people and with certain strategies, because otherwise you're going to have a rough time. Like I said, if you play this deck and you're thinking, oh my god, I am going to summon a barrier statue, and I am going to win the game off of that barrier statue, and I don't care what you're playing, then this is not the deck for you. But if you want to think about a lot of different interactions with between how you interact with your opponent and how you efficiently use your interruptions, because your interruptions are very few, but I would say they're quite high quality. White Knight is insane quality for an interruption because he's basically Unicorn plus whatever you want out of this pile of cards. I would strongly recommend to learn all the matchups and learn all the interactions that you can do with this deck and how you would respond, and already like pre-plan how you would respond to something, and then how you would respond in case he has one certain disruption, like for example Imperm. And that will help you beat stuff. I have a couple of replays stored up. Maybe I'm going to post them or not, but I'm going to wait for the new format. Anyways, this is how test hands work with Dogmatika, and I hope you guys enjoyed. See you later.